Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Friday, January 6th. And we begin tonight with a warning from Ottawa for Canadians in Mexico's Sinaloa state. They're being advised to limit their movements and shelter in place due to violence in that part of the country. A spokesperson for Global Affairs Canada says visitors should also avoid demonstrations and not attempt to cross road blockades, even if they appear unattended. Canadian tourists were trapped inside a hotel in the popular city of Mazatlan yesterday. This came as buses that were supposed to take them to the airport burned outside. The violence began after security forces captured alleged drug trafficker Ovidio Guzman. He is a son of former cartel boss Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. All right, well, back at home, Canada's unemployment rate declined for the third time in 4 months in December as the economy added more than 100,000 jobs. Statistics Canada says an increase in full-time work helped to bring the jobless rate to 5.0%, which is close to last summer's record low of 4.9%. Wages continue to grow at a year-over-year pace of more than 5% for the seventh consecutive month. But wage growth still lags far behind the country's inflation rate, which was 6.8% in November. The cost of building 6 Arctic offshore patrol ships for the Navy and 2 similar ships for the Coast Guard continues to rise. Amendments to the contracts awarded to Irving Shipbuilding in Halifax were released earlier this week in Ottawa. The price tag for the new Navy warships is now $4.98 billion. Now, this is up from an earlier projection of $4.3 billion. And the contract for the 2 Coast Guard vessels is now $1.6 billion, an increase of $100 million. In October, Parliament's budgetary watchdog pegged the estimated cost of designing and building the Navy's 15 new surface combatants at more than $84 billion. This is a 9% increase from the $77 billion estimate released in February 2021. Some of Canada's largest police associations say they're banding together to identify the root causes behind the killings of 5 officers in the past 4 months. The groups say they will review judicial and public policy frameworks. This includes bail and sentencing practices, as well as what they call a growing and chronic shortage of officers. They then plan to call for change to make sure what they call a wave of violence against police doesn't continue. The 4 associations involved represent about 60,000 police personnel. Turning to Winnipeg now, where a controversial landfill has reopened to the public. This comes after weeks of conversations between the city and demonstrators who had set up blockades. The protesters were calling for a search of the Brady Road Resource Management Facility for the bodies of Indigenous women believed to be the victims of an alleged serial killer. Indigenous groups and family members have been calling for a search. This comes after the partial remains of Rebecca Contois were found in the landfill last summer. Police have charged Jeremy Skibicki with first-degree murder in the deaths of Ms. Contois and 3 other women whose bodies have not been found. On the East Coast, the estimate for the insurance cost to date of Hurricane Fiona in Atlantic Canada has now reached $800 million. Now, that's according to Catastrophe Indices and Quantification Incorporated, which made an initial estimate in October 2022 of $660 million. The September 24th storm now sits at the 7th largest catastrophe in Canada's history in terms of insured damages. Damage resulted from torrential rainfall, large waves, storm surges, downed trees, and widespread power outages. All right, well, on the other side of the country, BC SPCA has seized 63 dogs that were kept in substandard conditions. They were kept by a person in Mission who claimed to be operating a rescue organization. The SPCA says the dogs included a mix of breeds and were found suffering from a range of medical and behavioral welfare problems. They were being kept in a garage and in various rooms inside the home. The organization says all of the dogs have since been examined by veterinarians and are now being cared for at SPCA locations. Canadian director Sarah Polley's latest film, Women Talking, expands to a wider theatrical release today. Adapted from Miriam Taves's acclaimed 2018 novel, which is loosely based on real events, Women Talking follows an ultra-conservative Mennonite colony in Bolivia. Their female members gather to discuss the revelation that the men in their village have been drugging and sexually assaulting them in their sleep. As one would expect from the title, the cast is nearly all women. All right, stay tuned. We'll have more news from around the world coming up after the break. We've got our crypto update as well as our energy update with Dan McTeague from Gaswizard.ca coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Up now, we have Forum Daily's energy update with Dan McTeague, senior petroleum analyst at Gaswizard.ca.
Well, thank you for this, Nima, and Happy New Year to all your viewers here. It's been quite a spectacular year, 2022. 2023 is going to be really a carbon copy of what we saw, not perhaps with the peaks and valleys that in which we saw the first half of 2022, push average prices for at the pumps from about $1.38 all the way up to $2.16 a liter by June. We're probably going to hit $2 a liter as an average in Canada, roughly around that time. But in the short term, you've got a lot of a lot of funny things happening with traders. We're very nervous about the Fed and other central banks around the world taking good news, which would otherwise be very bullish for energy prices, and converting those into fear that that will mean even higher interest rates, as central banks who've lent and provided quantitative easing or easy borrowing with low interest rates for far too long are now trying to do their very best to crash global economies. That some may characterize that as unfair because they're concerned about inflation, but it's not lost on yours truly that if you're going to increase carbon taxes and you have a central bank, the Bank of Canada, saying they're good with green policies, that will see carbon taxes rise by 3.5 cents a liter come April 1st, and a clean fuel standard, which kicks in on July 1st, which could start the long process of 7 years towards what will be a 28 cent a liter average price increase by 2030. Those numbers alone on fuel are higher than what the Bank of Canada is recommending as inflation. So it seems that they can't have it both ways. They don't want inflation, but they're willing to grease the rails by supporting climate policies, ridiculous, irrelevant climate policies that are not only trashing the value of the Canadian dollar and driving up the cost of energy and driving, as a result, the cost of food. They're also, of course, the very thing that are going to see prices move much higher in the years ahead. So for all those reasons, 2023 is definitely going to be a very expensive year. Don't believe that what we're seeing today in the first week or second week of January is indicative of where we're going. We've seen gas prices across Canada drop about 8 to 9 cents a liter. That's a head fake. Don't fall for it, because ahead of us lies some pretty significant price increases. Diesel, of course, will continue to be at or well above the $2 a liter threshold towards summer. I expect that to be towards $2.75. So whether you are in British Columbia, where Vancouver prices are $1.70, look for this time next week, possibly $1.73, not much in the way of movement. Interior BC in the $1.60, 65 range, moving up to by about 2 or 3 cents a liter. Alberta, where the Premier rightly got rid of their provincial sales tax of 4 cents a liter. Bad timing, by the way, because over the previous 2 weeks up to the January 1st, wholesale prices had gone up in the United States by 20 cents a liter. So people didn't get the full effect of the 20 cent a liter hit. Gas stations withheld, and unfortunately wound up with about a 15 cent a liter increase. Those actual prices could start to trend down a little bit, down below, say, $1.28 on average in the province of Alberta. We're going to be looking at continuation of stable prices in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, respectively, $1.46 in Saskatchewan and about $1.47 to $1.48 in Manitoba. Ontario, that's going to remain pretty much where it is now, up and down a couple of pennies, likely a little ahead of where it is right now in the $1.40, 42 range. Quebec, same thing, $1.56. And the Maritimes, well, the Maritimes will continue to see their price increases by the end of the week, probably to the tune of about 5 cents a liter on average. So, Nima, we're looking at a scenario in Canada where everyone wants to look for all the excuses as to why inflation is high, why the cost of living is so high. Very few people want to spend the time recognizing that one of the most important things that all of these commodities have in common is that they're priced in US dollars and that they are based on energy. Hydrocarbons, whether it's natural gas or diesel or oil, are all likely to move and surge ahead as the world continues to struggle with tightness in supply, made no better by the fact that Canada has refused not only to supply the world with natural gas, which it has significant amounts of, but oil as well. We're the third largest producer in the world. And if anybody says that global inflation is a global phenomenon, when it comes to energy, Canada has a lot of explaining to do as to why it refused to get pipelines built to get our energy that the world desperately needs to markets. So that'll be the theme for 2023. Looking for more next week at this time. Nina, back to you.
Always lots to consider, Dan. Again, that was Dan McTeague, Senior Petroleum Analyst at Gaswizard.ca. All right, well, stay tuned. We'll take a look at crypto markets right after the break. Welcome back. Up now, Forum Daily's weekly crypto and digital asset update with Bobby Del Rio, host of the Daily Drop. Take it away.
So 2023 has started off with a bang, which is a bit of an understatement. So Gemini and Genesis, who have two very similar names but are very different businesses, have been in a very public battle on Twitter. Unfortunately, there's billions of dollars at stake. And, so I did an episode about Genesis's troubles. Genesis is the biggest lender in crypto. Yesterday, they announced, unsurprisingly, that they're laying off 30% of their staff, which is very, very significant, and obviously indicates that there's major troubles afoot. You keep hearing they may be declaring bankruptcy. You heard it a little bit. You're hearing it a lot now. The parent company is DCG, Digital Currency Group, and they just sold one of their big businesses. They're selling assets. They're closing things. DCG is huge. DCG owns CoinDesk, the media outlet. They own Grayscale, right, which is the biggest trust for Bitcoin in the world, and they own Genesis. So we're still trying to figure out, okay, so how exposed is Genesis? Are they going to declare bankruptcy? If so, does that mean Gemini, who they owe, another $1 billion or so to, could they potentially declare bankruptcy? Are there any rehypothecations within the DCG universe, right? Which basically means, are they misappropriating customer funds? Are they doing anything financially suspicious? Because if so, could they declare bankruptcy? Like, this is essentially what the crypto industry has become, is you're trying to figure out who's honest, who's transparent, and who's about to go under, and who are they taking with them. And speaking of people going under, Silvergate, which is, the most significant bank in crypto in the world, yesterday they lost 40% of their stock in 24 hours. And they just announced 40% of their staff is being laid off. This is not good. You're talking about the biggest lender with major layoffs. You're talking about the most significant bank with layoffs. DCG may be the most significant oligopoly because there's about 200 companies linked to DCG in terms of companies they own outright or are invested in. And all of these names may be declaring bankruptcy. Even if they don't declare bankruptcy, they're so close to declaring bankruptcy that they're taking all of these smaller companies with them. And the Silvergate announcement is really scary because also what it means is now there's risk in the TradFi world. So TradFi is traditional finance. Because Silvergate was a bank. Silvergate wasn't like a coin or like a DeFi protocol. It was like a full-on bank. Still is for now, but we're curious to see, okay, well, what other traditional finance entities are now vulnerable as a result of all this contagion? And if we really track back the genesis, pardon the pun, of this entire contagion effect, it's FTX, right? So again, we still have billions of dollars missing from the FTX Alameda debacle. And people are trying to figure out, okay, so like how incestuous is this ecosystem? Because you've got FTX and Alameda and all of the horrible things that they've done to the ecosystem. And it looks to be taking DCG down with them, Silvergate, Gemini, how many other people are going down with them. So this is how we're starting off 2023. It's obviously a risk-off environment. I don't think investors want to touch crypto with a 10-foot pole right now. With that said, people who are looking to invest long-term, like Kathy Wood, they keep doubling down, tripling down on their investments. So I guess it depends on your time horizon and in your belief in crypto. But certainly short-term, it's terrifying, and we're just hoping it doesn't get worse. So I wish I had better news, but that's what I have. Over to you, Nima.
All right, thanks, Bobby. Again, that was Bobby Del Rio, host of The Daily Drop. The program focuses on all things crypto and airs on Fridays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, only on the News Forum Network. All right, stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back with a look at news from around the world, of course. Stay with us. An uneasy calm has fallen over Ukraine's capital in the first hours of a Russian ceasefire declaration to mark the Orthodox Church Christmas. No explosions have been heard in Kyiv since the unilateral truce began, but air raid sirens have blared across the country. Still, residents of Kyiv have ventured out to buy gifts, cakes, and groceries for their Christmas Eve celebrations. Turning to the U.S. now, where Republican leader Kevin McCarthy is getting closer to becoming the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. At least some of the far-right holdouts who have previously denied him support have relented and are now backing him. It comes after 4 grueling days and 13 failed votes that have left Republicans in disarray. But even if Mr. McCarthy is able to secure all the votes he needs, he will emerge as a weakened speaker, having given away some of the office's powers. The chaos in the House comes on the day 2 years ago that a violent mob of supporters of former President Donald Trump stormed the U.S. Capitol. And since then, more than 930 people have been charged with federal crimes, and hundreds more remain at large. China is seeking to minimize the possibility of a major new COVID-19 outbreak during this month's Lunar New Year travel rush. The government is calling on travelers to reduce trips and gatherings, particularly if they involve elderly people, pregnant women, small children, and those with underlying health conditions. The call stops short of asking citizens to stay home entirely, although some local governments have urged migrant workers not to return home. Authorities expect more than 2 billion trips to be made during the week-long festival season. All right, well, back in the U.S., employers added 223,000 jobs in December, the lowest monthly increase in 2 years. It's evidence that the U.S. economy remains healthy, but it's also a sign that the Federal Reserve may still have to raise interest rates aggressively to slow growth and cool inflation. The job growth capped a second straight year of robust hiring, but the hefty pay raises that have accompanied it likely contributed to a spike in prices, which have catapulted inflation to its highest level in 40 years. Meanwhile, Europe ended a bad year for inflation with some relief as price gains eased again. The European Union statistics agency Eurostat says the consumer price index for the 19 countries that use the euro currency rose 9.2% in December from a year earlier. While the cost of living is still painfully high, that is the slowest pace since August, and it's the second straight decline in inflation since June of 2021. The main driver of inflation has been energy prices, which slowed as natural gas costs slipped from all-time highs this summer. All right, switching gears to a new study by the International Labor Organization, which says allowing people to choose when and where they work can be a win-win for both employees and businesses. While historically, salary and benefits have topped the list of incentives for employees, the COVID-19 pandemic has seen a shift to prioritizing work-life balance. The report says the psychological and physical health of employees improves, along with job satisfaction, performance, and loyalty when flexible work schedules are offered. Police in Kenya are investigating the death of a local LGBTQ plus activist whose body was found stuffed in a metal box. The body of Edwin Chiloba was found on Wednesday on a road in Uasin Gishu County in the west of the country. Police say a motorcycle taxi operator reported seeing the box dumped by a vehicle with no license plates. The rider reported the incident to police officers who were manning a nearby roadblock. Kenya's LGBTQ plus community has often decried discrimination and attacks in a country where sex between men is illegal. The U.S. Geological Survey says the Hawaiian volcano Kilauea has begun erupting inside its summit crater. This comes less than a month after Kilauea and its larger neighbor Mauna Loa stopped releasing lava. The agency says the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory detected a glow in webcam images. Now, this indicates that Kilauea had begun erupting inside Halemaumau crater at the volcano's summit caldera. One of the world's most active volcanoes, Kilauea last erupted for 16 months, starting in September of 2021. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin continues to make what doctors describe as a remarkable recovery. 4 days after going into cardiac arrest and being resuscitated on the field, his agent says Mr. Hamlin is now breathing on his own and able to talk. The Bills say Mr. Hamlin even joined the team meeting this morning on FaceTime, telling teammates, quote, "Love you boys." In a statement, the team says Mr. Hamlin's neurologic function remains intact. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Take care, Canada.